Hey guys, Danielle Alavi here, and I am so proud to bring you Muscle Media RX. I'm sure most of you are very familiar with Muscle Media magazine that came out in the late 80s, and since that time it has taken on a very different face, if you will, and it is an honor for me to introduce to you the editor-in-chief, Dr. Tom Fisher, who will be explaining to you what that evolution looks like and where we're going with Muscle Media.
Wonderful to be here, Danny. Thanks for having me.
Hey guys, Danielle Alavi here, and we are so excited to introduce Muscle Media RX. Many of you must be familiar with Muscle Media magazine that came out in the late 80s, early 90s, which was focused on strictly bodybuilding and everything that encompassed it. More recently, it has taken on a life form all its own, and it is my pleasure and honor to introduce to you the current editor-in-chief, Dr. Tom Fisher, who I have sitting here with me today.
Hey, thanks a lot, Danny. Great to be here. This is an exciting time. We're morphing the magazine into something that it's still going to maintain its bodybuilding roots, but it's going to be more of a lifestyle expose and a vehicle to explore some of the latest developments in medicine and paramedicine. Since the 1980s, when the magazine first was in its infancy, this was kind of the heyday of bodybuilding. And this was back in the Weider years. If any of you, I'm sure most of you are familiar with this, Ben and Joe Weider, who was arguably instrumental in the development, the promotion of professional bodybuilding. And these were the golden years. It's often referred to as that. And the magazine, initially with the Phillips brothers, that's Sean and Bill, their vision was to be a clearinghouse for everything that took place in the gym. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it's just an evolution. I don't see it as being a fault. But the profession and the field of bodybuilding has certainly changed. One of the things that's often talked about is that the demise of many of the magazines, the print magazines, can be directly attributed to the social media and the online presence. Has a lot to do with the immediacy of the information and also the fiscal aspects of it. It's just a lot easier to tweak it and to make the information more readily available. But the cat being out of the bag, what I mean by that is back in the day, we had mammoth bodybuilders, unnaturally large bodybuilders. And if you've ever seen some of these boys and girls up close and personal, it's really quite disarming. But this is still a delicate subject, but I'm just going to go ahead because of my position. I've been there all along, and I've been on all sides of this issue. But the cat is out of the bag relative to the use of performance-enhancing drugs, and that is most notably anabolic steroids. And back then, years and years ago, it was talked about in hushed tones in the gymnasium and perhaps in a locker room, and maybe you went to see that doctor who could prescribe something for you. Well, now, in recent years, everybody has kind of sheepishly admitted, like, okay, so, all right, yes, we're all doing it. All right, well, that's fine. But now that bridge has been crossed, it's had a lot of ramifications, not the least of which is the popularity and the ready availability of TRT. And that's testosterone replacement therapy, and or bioidentical hormone replacement therapies, which is an offshoot of that. Anyway, to get more to the point, initially the magazine was focused purely on the gym. Then it began to morph a little bit outside of the gym, but very, very cautiously. I've been at the helm since 2016, so I've been around to take it in a slightly different direction. I guess for full disclosure here, I need to tell you that I'm a professor at a major research university here in Florida. And so I have seen firsthand that, and along with my own private practice, because I've had a private practice since 1986, I've seen some significant changes in the field of medicine, in the field of bodybuilding, in the field of fitness, in the field of health, in the field of everything to do with wellness and all the other associated pursuits. But because the cat's out of the bag, there's been a discernible reduction in the popularity and the sheer number of people engaged in pure bodybuilding. So we decided that we needed to get out and reach a larger audience. And so since 2016, I've taken this out of the gym. We still maintain our roots in the gym, but I've taken it out and put it sometimes into the lab, the research lab, and also into lifestyle, and incorporated a lot of things where it's more described in terms of fitness and active lifestyle. And bodybuilding certainly is a part of that. It just depends upon how much and how far you want to take that. Every exercise is essentially bodybuilding, but it's only when you take it past a certain threshold to where you begin to take your body to its natural limits, where you start to rely upon things less natural.
Sure, sure. And where do you think that shift took place? You know, do you think it was because a lot of these guys started, having medical issues? I mean, obviously, premature death, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. Oh, this is really painful to talk about, but a lot of, well, if you've kept up with the field of bodybuilding, a large number, I'm just not going to pinpoint this, but a large number of the very famous bodybuilders and very active, well-known bodybuilders back in the 70s and 80s and even into the 90s are sadly no longer with us. A lot of what was being taken back then was not under a physician's care. The sourcing of the materials was certainly in question.
Sure.
A lot of what was taken to be human testosterone was either bovine or porcine or canine, or it just wasn't what it was supposed to be. Did it provide results? Yes, it did. Did it have drawbacks and price to be paid? Yes, apparently so. So this, however, is very, very similar to the changes that I've seen in medicine. It's because I've been in medicine for many years, and back in the mid-70s, 1970s, oh my goodness, I was an EMT paramedic. So back then, the medical profession was such, and I was immersed in it. Usually, because of my role, I was in the emergency room, so I saw that to more or less the exclusion of other types of specialty. But here now, being a university professor and being in private practice and circulating in some unusual groups and in some just unusual circles, professional circles, I've seen a discernible change too. We can talk about that too if you want to. The switch from the doctor and then the nurse and then orderlies way back in the day to what it is today, where you rarely see a doctor.
Sure.
Most of the healthcare providers, most of the hands-on anywhere is being accomplished by physician extenders, either physician's assistants or nurse practitioners. Yeah.
Oh, and I'm sure that's really changed the game, if you will, when it comes to how these things are prescribed and the roles that they play. Do you think that when it comes to things like testosterone replacement therapy. I mean, I know that the anabolic steroid world really put a damper and a bad rep, if you will, on steroids. Like, what is your opinion or feedback on, what that role plays now? Because obviously so many people require hormone replacement therapy. And like, what has that evolution really taught us coming from bodybuilding to wellness?
Well, I see that just the general aura that surrounded steroids back in the 80s and the 90s when I was going through my graduate work and working on my doctorate. And actually, I did a bodybuilding show. One. I did
How did that go?
one bodybuilding show. Oh, my goodness me. To anybody who's done it out there, and I'm not talking about does this all the time, but I'm talking about anybody who's decided to dabble and just give it a go. I did one because I was dating a competitive bodybuilder at the time, and she, now my wife, kind of got me into it. But the discussions about performance enhancing drugs, PEDs, was really, I just made mention, it was usually discussed in hushed tones or maybe in the privacy of homes or, maybe over an adult beverage somewhere in a quiet corner. But now, because I am in the medical community and I see it, it's the stigma is gone. It's really a very interesting evolution because people now openly say, "Oh yeah, oh good grief, yeah, I'm on TRT." They say it without even blinking. There's no hushed tones anymore. It's just out in the open, and no one gives a second thought to it. Really, it's just seen as something very, very natural, which of course it should be because it's only in recent years, though, and I think that I may be guilty here of conflagrating the world of bodybuilding with the world of medicine, but I don't think so because I think they're inexorably linked, and I think that they do walk hand in hand. So some of the revolution, if you will, that's occurred in one has naturally had an impact upon the other.
Sure. Well, and there's still doctors out there today that are against hormone replacement therapy, which I find interesting.
Well, okay. Again, let me put on my exercise physiologist hat and go, well, show me the research. Because researchers, and of course, being my university responsibilities, we live and die by research. And one study does not a concept make. But repeated studies, and the whole idea behind science is that any study is meant to be, if it's meant to be published, it's meant to be challenged.
Sure.
And you might challenge it and find it to be flawed or perhaps mistaken or perhaps it's a confirmation. And so over the years, those who are denying the usefulness of TRT and testosterone replacement therapies, and by the way, that's for both male and female.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll just make that very, very clear. It's not just guys sitting there wanting to, tear phone books in half. Actually, what it is, it's to recapture and to enhance their lives. Their ADLs is what we call them, activities of daily living. Just if you find yourself dragging or fatigued, or you find yourself brain fog, you don't have real direction, your give a damn factor, if I may, it is really low. You might want to go see your physician and have some blood work done and see where you sit.
Right.
The neat thing is that if we find out where you are, where you've been, then we can find out where you're going, and it might not be where you want to be.
Sure. I think that could be said across the board. I just recently did Inside Tracker and found out my inner age is about 5 years higher than my current age. So it was kind of disappointing, but eye-opening at the same time. And I do think that a lot of people just don't have that insight or not seeking that information out there.
And that's fairly common. As a matter of fact, what you just mentioned there, Danny, was a huge growing field of anti-aging medicine. I'm sure that everybody's heard the term anti-aging, and some people don't really like that. They think it's how about aging gracefully? I don't know what you want to call it. I prefer to choose the much larger umbrella, and that is preventative medicine.
Nice.
So there are some things that we can do to use medical science and not what's been proffered here in the past couple of years. That's not science. A lot of what was put out there is propaganda. But using science in order to correct some problems, and if it is easily corrected through testosterone replacement or hormonal replacement or any of the other preventative medicines too, ancillary medicines, there's cryotherapy, and then there's PRP and some very, very interesting work being done with stem cells. So a lot of this is on the pioneering cusp, and so I see bodybuilding is kind of coming along with that. We just don't see that many huge, unusually and remarkably large cut individuals anymore. It's really become less of a standard to aspire to.
Right. And most people do. I mean, the focus has really been towards wellness, especially in the last, 5, 10 years. It really has. People are becoming more and more aware that, they want to live longer, or we are already living longer, but they want to have a quality as well as living longer, because, you don't really want to live longer if the quality is not there.
Well, I like to see it as kind of a continuum here. Just using bodybuilding as an example, you get if you look at the evolution of bodybuilding, I'm talking about competitive bodybuilding. Way back in the day, you had some just amazing physiques, the most notable of which, of course, is Arnold back in the heyday, Franco Colombo, and then on the female side, there's Anya Longer and childhood crush here, boy crush anyway on Rachel McLeish. But then Bev Francis came along, and Ronnie Coleman came along, and it evolved into something very, very different. And then Linda Murray was there, and the physiques changed and the standards changed. What I have discovered here since taking the helm of Muscle Media magazine is that from letters to the editor, the standards have changed yet again. We went through a whole phase where, and they still exist out there, the natural shows. Well, the natural shows out there display guys that you could see. You see them in the gym all the time, and you see them at the pool or at the beach or whatever. But as far as the business is concerned, I was told by a promoter one time that it's all well and good, but that's not what people are there for. They're there to see and please forgive the term, but they're there to see the freaks.
Yeah.
They're there to see somebody who is 300 plus pounds with single digit body fat,
Totally chiseled.
Totally chiseled, and whoa, it's an awesome sight, but. Right now, and if you'll notice past covers of Muscle Media, we've gotten away from some of the very, very massive bodybuilders to something, and this is what we discussed in our productions, it is something more accessible, something that's more attainable, something, the words have been used around it, realistic has also come out there, that the average Joe, the average Jane can look at and say, I could do that. I wouldn't mind looking like that. And of course, how you do it, that's what the magazine is all about. But again, if we're talking about the transition from purely bodybuilding into a more lifestyle-oriented health, wellness, fitness, physiology, science-based training, conditioning, all of these things being offered each and every issue.
So earlier today, I know you and I were talking about the current perception of how people view doctors. And, I should say that most people, either avoid doctors because they're not looking forward to what the doctors have to say, or they position the doctors as, those are the people they go see when shit hits the fan, if you will.
Yeah.
So what is your opinion on, that thought process? And you mentioned preventative health and kind of taking a different approach. What is your opinion on that, and where do you think we're going?
Well, it's been discussed for many years that we have an illness-based medical system. In other words, it's based upon people being ill. The only reason you go to see a doctor is because something's broken, something's wrong.
Sure.
You don't go in just to say, just wondering how you're doing, how's the family?
Checking in.
That's right. I just won the lottery, and I just thought you'd like to know. No, it's not it at all. No, as a matter of fact, it on the other end of that pendulum, we all probably know some people who resist going to the physicians and going to doctors or healthcare providers. We just use that as the umbrella right now because that's what it's rapidly becoming. Because they're afraid they may find something. And of course, being in the biz here, as it were, the sooner you can find it, the sooner you can deal with it. But again, I guess ignorance is bliss, but
To an
not
extent.
yeah, but not necessarily. Not necessarily. But there has been a change. I made mention a little while ago when I was indoctrinated into the medical community as an EMT paramedic operating out of the emergency room. There was clearly defined roles. And we had doctors. And back then in the early 70s, we really didn't have physician's assistants, PAs, I'm sure you've heard, or nurse practitioners. What we had was the doctor, and then immediately below the doctor was the nurse. But there was a distinct hierarchy there, too. We had registered nurses, RNs, and then there was a certain hierarchy in there, too. We had RN, BSN, we had a bachelor's degree as opposed to a diploma. And I don't want to get into it too far, and then just below that, there were LPNs, licensed practicing nurses. And then below that, well, there were a variety of little terms, and it just depended upon the hospital or the environment in which you found yourself, but mostly it was just orderlies after that, just like catch-all. You guys do everything else. And it's changed. Today, being active in the field, physicians, doctors, MDs, DOs, and it goes to other types of professions, DPTs, doctors of physical therapy and the like. They're not really the front line anymore. And one of the big reasons is they don't have to be, because with the advent of physician's assistants, PAs, and nurse practitioners, we've got what are known as physician extenders. And for the most part, depending upon the practice and whatnot, when you go to see a healthcare provider, that healthcare provider is either going to be a PA or is operating under a physician or a nurse practitioner. Sure. And then when you get down into the nurses, oh my goodness me, everything has changed. Now we've got several layers of RNs. We've got PhD RNs, which are doctor nurses, which
blurs the lines.
Yeah, blurs the line. And then, of course, master's level and all points in between. And then that's not the most remarkable, because once you go down past a certain level, we have all of the medical assistants. We have medical techs, medical assistants, medical associates, whatever. And there's this entire substrata there that does a great many of the hands-on type things. I'm friends with many providers, and I was speaking with one of my physical therapist colleagues and friends and colleagues the other day, and he was bemoaning the fact that he doesn't really see patients anymore. What he does is he does the intakes and the releases, maybe, and then all the hands-on stuff are handled by PTAs, or physical therapy techs, or physical therapy assistants, or whatever, or athletic trainers. And the majority of his practice time is spent either filling out insurance forms or HIPAA compliance forms, which is medical stuff. But so there has been a decided change in role and responsibility, and I think it's I don't think that it's come around to stabilize yet. I think it's going to become more and more and more. in a lot of instances, I've been talking to some of my colleagues, but it's more difficult to get into a PA school than it is to get into MD or DO
Oh
in med
dear.
school. And here, just for just total disclosure, one of the allures for being a PA is it's 2 years. It's a 2-year program. PA is a Master of Science in Medicine. That's what it is. It's like a master's degree, but you're practicing medicine. You have clinical rotations and everything else contained in that 2 years. But the thing is, 2 years from the time your backside first hits one of the chairs until you're out there taking your boards, and then you get right into practice, as opposed to med school, which is generally 5 years of undergrad, and then 4 years of med school, and then several years of residency and internship, et cetera, et cetera. So you've got a dozen or more years invested there, as opposed to 2. So you
Right.
see, it's an economic and not just in a monetary sense, but also in the sense of time expenditure.
Sure. Do you think these, with the current, I guess, educational system, that these doctors and even mid-levels and nurses, are being set up to play a role in more of a preventive health approach?
I haven't seen a great deal
Yeah.
of movement towards that. Although, what do they say in Star Wars? The great disturbance in the Force. Well, and there has been, and I think it's inevitable because, look, if the COVID situation, whatever circumstance, whatever you might want to call it. I don't know which side of the fence you sit on, whether you follow the science with a capital S or you follow the propaganda. Things have changed. Perceptions have changed. So this entire preventative thing, there are many more discussions now that the illness-based system that we have right now, and it's been variously described, but we're all treating things downstream.
Sure.
And what that means is that by the time a physician or a healthcare provider is consulted, something's already happened. Something broke or something's not right. So everything that we do is to try to fix what has already occurred. And so there is this growing kind of a germination of an idea that, wow, wouldn't it be great if we were able to get on upstream of this whole thing? And there are problems with that. We just mentioned one of them, and that's people's reticence to go and consult a healthcare provider because they might find something.
Yeah.
And we all know folks like that.
No news is better than bad news.
Well, yeah, that's right. Well, and again, ignorance is bliss. But
Yeah.
the problem is that if you wait that, and any physicians tuning into this, or healthcare providers, you would understand this. You speak this fluently. That if you wait and you wait and you wait, by the time you come in, needle and the damage done, as Neil Young said. I mean, you're already past the point where we can cure you or fix you totally. Now we can work on trying to get you better, but that's sometimes even that's going to be a stretch. So the only way that you can do it effectively and treat things upstream is to enlist and encourage and assign responsibility and accountability to the patient themselves. They ideally must be part of the treatment team. And the old management acts, even though no involvement, no commitment. So if they're not involved in the diagnosis and the prognosis and the treatment, then they're passive spectators and they're not active participants. And you see, now we're getting into some very touchy things because now we're getting into sociology and psychology, and I understand that. But if you're going to have a preventative system, you've got to have some way of monitoring things to detect stuff.
Right.
And there are various models out there. One that I subscribe to is it's variously called concierge medicine or
Yeah.
diploma medicine, whatever. It's got a variety of different names. But you join this group, and as a consequence of joining the group, you are obliged, mandated, to have regular blood blood checks, blood panels run, and regular checkups. You just come on in, and it's some people euphemistically call it a wellness visit. Well, whatever it is, it's just checking and seeing. We know where you were. Let's see where you are now and see if things have changed. And I particularly subscribe to the use of the blood panels, although there's blood panels and blood panels. It depends upon it depends upon A, the tests that are run, and B, who's doing the interpretation. Because there's a big difference between what's normal and what's acceptable. Those are two very different terms. What is normal today, by other measures, is certainly not acceptable.
Right. So let's dive in a little deeper to the preventative approach. When, you mentioned blood panels, which is awesome. And I, like I said, I've used Inside Tractor, and I've kind of more recently in the last several years have kind of gotten interested in what's going on in that regard. What else, how can we set this up to where, our communities are taking more of a preventative approach, and what does that look like, and what does that mean for the healthcare system?
Well, oh boy,
Compound question. Sorry.
Yeah, no, Danny. Honestly, it's a doozy, because you just asked about where are the keys to the kingdom. This involves so many different moving parts, and the problem is that many of the moving parts are entrenched. Not only in the business, I'm talking about with the medical community, which is backed up by big pharma. No, I didn't mean to say that, because now I come across like an evangelist, and that's not my role. I'm a scientist here. I'm a researcher, and I'm a clinician. So I view things very, very differently. And believe me, I'm on both sides of the stethoscope. I'm very comfortable on my side of the stethoscope, talking to others about their problems. I have had a great deal of trouble, and I've been told that I make a lousy patient. Okay, but that's
I've heard a lot of doctors do.
Two of the worst groups of people to take on as patients. Number one are athletes, because they have such an intimate relationship with their own bodies, their own physiques, anatomy, and physiology. But the worst, bar none, are doctors and healthcare providers. It's just endemic. So, I find myself in good company. So, but anyway, what can we do? Some of the things that could help. People are primarily concerned about cost. And costs are going to come down as they become more available, because competition is going to take over. I'm a firm believer in the free market. What we have right now is insurance, and insurance only kicks in after something has already happened.
Sure.
See? I mean, just think about the way that you might have approached a healthcare provider. You've got something wrong. You feel bad. You've got this thing or whatever, and you go in and they tell you, well, there's really nothing much we can do. You just go ahead and drink some fluids and get some rest. You walk out of there and you feel ripped off. Hey, man. Hey, I want at least a pill. I mean, give me a prescription. I want one. Here, let me go. I want to dive into the medical hierarchy the way that it is established today. It's 1 pill, 2 pills. And if that doesn't work, get a shot. And if that don't work, surgery. That's it. But when you walk out and you've got nothing more than, gosh, you need to get a little bit more rest and drink more fluids, that's
I could have told you that.
Well, no, yeah, that's on. Yeah, and then you get the bill. It's like, whoa. But the reticence and the relationship, and I think this is at the crux too, Danny. Let me just broach this subject, because this is what I teach my students at the university. Because they're all pre-med, by the way. All my students are pre-med. They're going to be either healthcare providers of one stripe or another. And I said, you've got to understand, with the system that exists today, there's a basic impasse. There's a basic miscommunication. We as healthcare providers can offer you the possibility of getting better. So we can offer possibility, and we can offer you the process of getting better. That's not what patients are there for. patients aren't interested in getting better. They're interested in getting best. They want to be fixed. They want to be cured. They want to be corrected. And oftentimes, the healthcare provider will use kind of a benchmark as what we call here, forgive me, but pre-morbid functioning. In other words, before whatever it is you got or whatever you broke, how were you functioning then? Can we bring you back to that level? Okay, now that's again on our side, on this side of the stethoscope. So again, we're trying to get you better, and it's going to be an incremental process, but the patient is looking for a fix. They're looking for a result. They're looking for a product
Right now.
right now, and they don't want to work for it. And so you see, and I'm not saying anything controversial here because I'm sure that you're sitting there going, well, yeah, pretty much, yeah, because you can relate to that. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that that's the way we've been raised, and so it seems normal because that's the way it's always been. Now, in order to correct that, wow, the first thing needs to happen is there needs to be a different kind of relationship of doctor and patient or healthcare provider. I keep using doctor. I use that as kind of a generic term to cover all healthcare providers. Anyway, that they're not there to simply let you run willy-nilly and that you're not involved. One of the hallmarks of preventative medicine is that you make the patient responsible and accountable. You make them an active participant in their treatment. And it doesn't mean just that doctor's office or that visit to the healthcare provider. It means their daily, every single thing that they do, what they eat, what they drink, how they sleep, what they exercise, the level of stress, how they let off steam, their social environment, all of those things. It's a huge it's a huge nut to crack. I'm trying to think of the right analogy here, because there's only one person that can truly fix the patient after they break, and that's the patient themselves. All the healthcare providers that sit around that big treatment table, and you're going to have specialists, subspecialties, and et cetera, we're all going to act as guides. We're all going to act, we will facilitate, we'll do everything that we possibly can, offer you the bounty of our knowledge and the depth of our experience. But the patient has to be actively involved. Otherwise, they have no skin in the game. And they're going to be looking at you to fix them. And sometimes that's asking healthcare providers to carry both ends of the log.
So obviously this revolution, if you will, needs to take place or has already kind of started taking place. Do you think it's realistic to think that people will be active participants in their own lives in that way from a health perspective?
Which hat do you want me to answer that with, Danny? Because
All of them.
no, all of them. No, don't get on a Freudian minefield there. Anyway, look, I can answer that psychologically, and boy.
And I ask that because, I think it's understood across the board that eating well, drinking enough water, regular exercise is good for you and is going to keep you relatively healthy, so to speak. But so many people don't do that. And we have this obesity crisis that continues to be a problem in our country here. And no one's really, the information's there. And most of these people, if not all of us, have, received this information. But clearly no big revolutions have quite taken place yet.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I just got back from Europe, and I traveled around Europe, but I was over at University of Barcelona. Had an appointment there, and something that I noticed over there in Europe, that there really wasn't a great deal of obesity.
No.
No. As a matter of fact, I was sitting with my wife, and we were sitting at a cafe having a glass of wine, and I was just looking, and of course my shrink side, my psychology side is I study and I study people. That's it. And it just struck me. And I asked my wife, do you notice anything missing? And, she didn't know the reference that I was talking to. And I said, there's really not a lot of obese people.
Mm-hmm.
So, wow, that is interesting. But let me kind of take a side step here and expand a little bit on this preventative side. Because listeners might have heard the term functional medicine being bandied about. Maybe you've heard that from time to time. And that's it's kind of an extrapolation, an extension of the old wellness philosophy, where it was supposed to be a wellness-based society as opposed to what we have right now as an illness-based society. And yet the term has it's been hijacked and it's been overused and it's been diluted down. I mean, now we have wellness centers. You ever been into a wellness center?
All sorts of
Yeah,
ones.
yeah. Do the people in there look particularly well? No, you see, so okay, but I give them credit because they are in there, and they're
Right.
in their own way. They are assuming some of the responsibility,
Right. Working towards
Yeah,
something.
they're working towards it. And again, there's that. You see, just having said that, that puts them on the same page as the healthcare provider because the healthcare provider is talking about getting better, and if they're getting more fit or getting fitter or getting whatever, that too implies a process. So if we could get on the same page with regard to accepting that this is a process to achieve a goal, to achieve a product, then okay, now we're making inroads.
Sure.
Now we're making some progress. But this whole concept, and if you want to, if you're curious about this, go ahead and do a Google search and get into it, because this functional medicine is really an offshoot, and you're seeing a lot of different permutations of this, not the least of which is anti-aging medicine that we just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
But again, this all speaks to, I am responsible. I live here. I got to take care of this. And this is a comprehensive thing. This is this, it's that, it's this. It's these, it's all of it, and how I fit into my environment, how I relate to my environment. And you know that no pill, no shot, no surgery is going to be able to make that happen. So it's going to require an investment. And here it is. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's the two currencies that exercise scientists and really medicine works in, and that is time and energy. Time and energy. Now, we're all granted finite time and energy. You got to realize that those resources are finite and that they're not endless. You don't just keep going back to get more and more and more and more and more. There's a limited amount. Now, how you allocate the time and energy is your responsibility, and you're going to be walking around in the product of your allocation and the decisions that you make. So you see, just having to put it into that context, all of a sudden, there's no way that you can avoid not being involved. And
Right.
I'm talking about actively involved. Your involvement doesn't end just by going into the office and sitting there and going, okay, fix me. However we do that. A lot of people do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, hell, we don't. I know that. But how many times, any medical professionals out there, how many times have you seen that? The expectation is, hey, I'm paying you. Come on. I'm here. What more do you want? Well, how much time you got?
Right.
Because here,
Exactly.
let me just start making a list of the things. And it goes far, far, far beyond that. And in future podcasts, we already talked about this on the outside. There are many components to this, and not the least of which, one of the basics, one of the fundamental principles behind functional medicine is gut health.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what was interesting is, you kind of you brought up cost and insurance earlier, and I recently had a colleague give me an interesting analogy comparing car insurance to health insurance. And what he was saying was that, you pay an arm and a leg for this car insurance. So God forbid if you get into a car accident, you're covered. But what it's not covering are your oil changes, are your tire rotations, are your
ADLs.
Yes, all of the things that require or that are necessary for that car to have in order to have the longest lifespan, right?
Right.
And our health insurance is kind of set up essentially the exact same way.
Yeah, and there are special policies that, like cancer policies,
Yeah.
they only cover if you get cancer.
Right.
God help you.
Right. But that mindset by itself, it's like you're kind of like, it's almost like you're expecting at some point that to take place.
Well, yeah, and it is kind of a gamble, and it's hedging your bets because what if comes up. But I also use the analogy of automobiles when I'm talking to my patients too, and this really gets down to what do you feed your body? They drive a Corvette, or they drive a Ferrari, they drive a top end Lexus, Maserati, whatever, and they put high test gas in it, and they put only synthetic oil in it, and the very finest of all the, and yet they go to McDonald's or Burger King or
putting all that diesel fuel in.
It's just like wow, they just spent $200 filling up the tank, and then they're going to go for some cheesy manufactured stuff that, if you really take a look at what's in it, most of the words you couldn't pronounce.
Yep.
Because it was made in a test tube. But you see, they don't see anything wrong with that because they're taking care of something tangible. If we could reorient that same kind of care, that same kind of passion, that same kind of investment mindset to ourselves, and this is an interesting burgeoning field, and I've been reading some great treatises on this, and they're readily available too. Lustig's work and Metabolical, just a great treatise. And if anybody wanted a good basic book just to go ahead and put your feet firmly on the ground and find out where ground zero exists, that's a great one right there, Metabolical. And another one is Superhuman. That's just an amazing treatise. And I love these because, as a wise man said, if you really know what you're doing and you really know your subject matter, if you can explain complex concepts to a sixth grader. And in both cases, both these authors are able to do that because a lot of the concepts they're talking about are inherently complicated. They're complex things, but they break them down sufficiently so that they are digestible. Gosh, how many little sub-references to the gut do I have to make here?
Truly. We're going to get into that way deeper. So bringing all of that together, we've talked about the patient, we've talked about the physicians and everything underneath them and the healthcare system. Let's bring that back to Muscle Media RX. Mm-hmm. What is your vision for it, and how do you want to bring this information to the table to our listeners? Okay,
well, for those of you who have been following Muscle Media for a number of years, I want to assure you that we're still going to be dealing with things in the gym about workout routines and training, but we're going to be including more and more science that's going to speak on a larger scale. I really want to reach a larger audience, and I regard Muscle Media RX as an extraordinary vehicle to get this word out. Muscle Media has tremendous name recognition. I mean, the Phillips brothers made it what it is. Remember from the Body for Life Challenge way back when? And it was absolutely brilliant. But we still have that name recognition. But I want this to, I want us to be a clearinghouse. And it's not just the magazine, because the magazine is also going to be enhanced by and backed up by our website. We're going to be flooding the zone with science, just study after study after study after study. And also we've got a number of other allies that are going to be contributing too. Have you noticed that there's an interesting recent popularity in the use of voluntary IV therapies?
Yes.
IV bars, or IV places, replenishment places. And not because anything's wrong, but because people are doing this prophylactically. In other words, they're doing this in a preventative sense, which, you see, that right there, if they're doing something in a preventative sense, they're already buying in
Right.
to
They
the
already
whole
know.
preventive thing and functional medicine, et cetera, et cetera. They're already taking a step in the right direction. So I'm encouraged by that. And I want to use Muscle Media RX as the vehicle that they can use, the clearinghouse that they can refer to, both the magazine and the website, to obtain that information. I want it to be readily available.
Very cool. Well, we're definitely, looking forward to having some, unique guest speakers on the show and looking forward to what we can do together for sure.
Well, and I need to make mention here, and in full disclosure, Danielle and I go way, way back, but Danielle was one of my star master's pupils a couple of years ago. So she's here, and I have not yet talked her into getting her doctorate, but that's another discussion. But the two of us are going to act as hosts and co-hosts for many of the medical professionals that we're going to come in. We're going to interview and find out where they sit and find out the services that they provide and anything that's innovative. And again, this is going to dovetail quite nicely with the new direction of Muscle Media RX.
Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Tom. It's always a pleasure.
Thank
And we're
you.
looking forward to what's next.
Okay, sounds good.